Okay, what's next? Well, your players need to be able to collect the pickup game objects when the player game object collides with them. For this to happen, the game needs to detect the collisions between the player game object and the pickup game objects and use this information to trigger a new behaviour. It's really important to test the collisions carefully. The pickup objects, the player's sphere, the ground plane, and the walls all have colliders. Without testing, the player might be able to collect and disable the wrong objects in the scene, for example, the ground plane. Let's get started. In the project window, go to the Scripts folder and open the Player Controller script for editing. Before you begin writing the script, let's think about what the code needs to do. It needs to detect and test collisions on the player's sphere collider. To do this, you're going to use the function onTriggerEnter. Imagine that you're playing a platform game, and you jump up to collect a perfect arch of coins, but bounce off every first one and fall back to the ground. That's not very elegant. The onTrigger function will detect the contact between the player game object and the pickup game objects without actually creating a physical collision. Let's start with the function declaration and parameters. Beneath the fixed update function, write void onTriggerEnter open brackets collider other closed brackets. Next, remember to add a set of curly braces to contain the function body. onTriggerEnter will be called by Unity when the player game object first touches a trigger collider. It will be given a reference to the trigger collider that has been touched. This is the collider called Other. This reference gives you a way to identify the colliders that the sphere hits. You could destroy the game object that the trigger collider is attached to. However, in case you want to add additional functionality to the collectible objects later on, in this project you'll only deactivate the game object rather than destroy it. So how can you deactivate the correct object, and in this case, the pickup game objects, using a script? Let's start to write the first line of code inside the function body for onTriggerEnter. You can address the other collider's game object through other.gameObject. To disable it, you need to use the method setActive. This method accepts a Boolean value inside the parentheses, that is, true or false. Use false to disable the game object. The full line should be other.gameObject.setActive open brackets false closed brackets semicolon. This code will disable game objects correctly, but you don't have a way to filter which game objects the sphere can disable. In the next video, you'll use the Unity tag system to do just that. Now, you've written code to deactivate game objects that the player game object collides with. But this should only apply to the pickup game objects. The ground or walls disappearing would not be good. To do this, you're going to use the built-in Unity tag system. Tags allow you to identify a game object by comparing the tag value to a string. The first thing we need to do is set up the tag value for the pickup object back in the Unity editor. In the project window, go to the prefabs folder and select the pickup prefab. You can also use the arrow next to one of the prefab instances in the hierarchy. This opens prefab edit mode. In the tag list at the top of the inspector, there's a few pre-made tags, but there's nothing called pickup. Select Add Tag. This brings up the Tags and Layers panel with a list that's currently empty. To create a new custom tag, select the Add button to add a new row to the tag list. In the new empty element, which will be tag 0, type pickup. So be exactly the same string that you use. You can close the Tags and Layers panel when you're done. Now you need to apply that tag. Select the tag drop-down again. You should see that your new tag is now available in the list. Select this tag from the list. The fab also as well Unity editor before you return to the script. In the next video, tag, you can use it to make sure the sphere only disables the correct game object. That if compare of any open bracket other dot game object dot compare tag open brackets and in quotation marks write pickup and then close that statement with 2 closed brackets. This is the if statement. Be careful here, exactly as you and cut and paste other dot game object dot set active open brackets false close brackets semicolon. Now this code will be called every time the sphere game object touches a trigger collider. It will collider to the and fix it, cut cubes, just like we were. Differentiate collision. Remember, if trigger displayed to first select the pigment in the inspector and enable the Is Trigger checkbox. Now, let's say you're almost done on this section of the project. There's one last tweak to make in the next video. Cubes. Won't treat it as static, as it will take option is to add select. Save your changes, then test in play mode. Save your chair, select Add Component and add a rigid body. Save your changes, then test in play mode. And, the cubes all fall through the floor. The force of gravity is pulling them down, and as floor in the inspector, you'll see that you could just disable the Use Gravity checkbox, which could prevent the cubes from being pulled downwards. However, this is only a partial solution. If you do this, even though the cubes would not respond to gravity, they would still respond to physics forces. This sets the rigid body component as a kinematic, and it can be everything from cubes that next. Now the cubes do what they did before, but more efficiently. Excellent! So, to recap, static colliders shouldn't move like walls and floors. Dynamic colliders can move and have a rigid body attached. Standard rigid bodies their trap and make